오늘 뉴스룸 2부 또 한 사람의 반가운 손님을 만나보겠습니다. 문학과 철학을 넘나들면서 수많은 베스트셀러를 탄생시킨 세계적인 작가죠. 바로 알랭 드 보통 씨입니다. 한국에서 특히 큰 사랑을 받고 있는데요. 최근에는 뉴스의 시대'라는 책을 발표해서 현대사회 속의 뉴스의 힘과 역할에 대해서 주목한 바 있습니다. 지난주에 그랜드 마스터 클래스'라는 지식 컨퍼런스에 참석차 내한에서 수천 명의 관중들과 대한민국 사회에 대해서 좌담을 갖기도 했습니다. 알랭 드 보통이 한국에 체류한 동안 인터뷰를 진행했습니다. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Can I call you Aleng?
Of course.
Okay, you can call me Sokki.
I will.
How is your trip going on in Korea?
Really nice. It's always such a pleasure to be here. It's my fourth time in Korea, and it's always fascinating, and I learn so much. So
Good.
it's great.
Sounds great. Okay. I'm very happy to have you here in my studio. And I've read your book, The News, A User's Manual, kind of news guide.
Yep.
Yeah. Your book was very helpful for me as a journalist to recognize what I'm doing every day. Anyway, many people say Aleng wrote about the news. Is he interested in journalism? So this is my first question. Why did you write about the news?
Because you are one of the most powerful people in Korea.
Thank
Where
you.
we are now is one of the most powerful places. Of course, power is in politics as well. Of course, power is in the army and industry. But to a huge extent, power is nowadays in the hands of the media. And, I started as a writer thinking, perhaps naively, that books change everything.
Yeah.
That what is in books is sacred and special. And I realized that, of course, people respect books, but what they really are influenced by day to day is the news. The news is the first thing people check in the morning on their phone, in the evening before they go to bed. It shapes national consciousness to an extraordinary degree. And I wanted to investigate more about how news works and what it does to our brains.
Okay. I agree with you. In your book, you said bias strives to explain what events mean and introduces a scale of values by which to judge ideas and events. Can you further elaborate on what this means?
Yes. Many modern news organizations, in a sense your own, they say to the audience, the viewer, we have a deal with you. We won't tell you what to think, but we'll give you the facts. We'll give you the information, and you, clever person, you can work out what it means. So we will not have bias. Because when people hear the word bias, they think, oh, propaganda, right-wing, left-wing, government, anti-government, and they think, no, just give me the news. Don't tell me, don't tell me anything else. And my view is that, in a way, we live surrounded by lots of very powerful biases.
Yes.
And it's sad if the good organizations, the thoughtful ones like yours, if they say, we're not going to try and tell the audience what it means, what we think, what it's really going, what the direction it's going, because this would be to try and influence the viewer too much. And I find it sad that in my society, the BBC, and others, perhaps this channel, as I say, in this society, the good guys say, no, we don't want to influence anyone.
Yes.
And I just think, well, no wonder sometimes the good ideas are missing because the good guys are so quiet, because they are so afraid of influence. So in my book, I try to make people feel a bit more courageous around the word bias. Of course there is bad bias, and of course we should run away from it. And of course we should have that no bias is better than bad bias. But even better than no bias is, in a way, a good kind of bias. A bias that tries to remind Koreans or British people, what should our society be like? How should we be living? What is right and wrong, etc.?
Good bias and bad bias, they might be controversial in Korea anyway. So, in your perspective, there cannot be the news that is completely fair, especially in terms of political aspects.
Yes, I think that in a way, the idea of having no bias at all is impossible. Let's say you're reporting a story about Islamic terrorism. just in the language you use, the images you show, the way you structure the story, even if you're not telling people, you know, an overt piece of propaganda, you will be guiding a certain kind of response. And I think it's almost better if people say, okay, we would like you to think this, or we would like you to think that, than if they say, we're just showing you the facts. And then it's almost more puzzling to the audience. So I think there is a terrible fear in news organizations that all bias is bad. It will be like Fox News or the Daily Mail in England, these very strong, quite horrible news organizations.
Let's stop talking about bias.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult thing anyway. You also said what should be laudable in news organization is not a simple capacity to collect facts, but a skill honed by intelligent bias. We are talking about how bias again anyway, at teasing out their relevance. Doesn't this statement sound a bit risky? I mean, the media could be the drum beaten by everyone.
Look, undoubtedly, it's always riskier to say what something means, to talk about values, right and wrong, than it is just to say, here's the facts, you cook it at home, you decide. Right? But I think this is an abdication of proper responsibility. And I think news organizations put all their prestige into the speed with which they gather the facts. We have the camera in Paris immediately. We have the camera in Rome, etc. And of course, this is interesting, but ultimately, what do viewers really need to do? They need a sense of how the world works, what they should be doing as citizens, where their country, Korea, could go. They need a sense of hope and direction and ideas, etc. And these are, I think, higher ambitions than merely saying we were the first people in Paris with a live feed.
Anyway, how often do you watch the TV news?
Like everyone, all the time. You know, we can't get away from the news. I think, you know, you'd have to be a hermit living in a cave to be able to get away from it. It's everywhere. And it's also very relaxing. And I observe, in a slightly worrying way, that there's something relaxing watching the disasters of others, the troubles of others. There's something in the way in which we say, the whole world's, you know, a terrible place.
Yes.
And actually, it helps you to go to sleep. I'm always struck by how you have the nightly news, terrible, thousands of people dead, etc. And 10 minutes later, people are asleep in bed.
Yeah.
And I think that it has become a kind of weird therapeutic exercise in which people say, my life's not so bad.
Yes. Actually, that is why I asked that question. You said, I can't remember exactly, but you said like this, finding news is related to accumulation of anxiety, right?
Yes.
And you offered another very important aspect in your book. You said that it would be easy to suppose that the real enemy of democratic politics must be the active censorship of news, but the real enemy is the overflow of random, unhelpful, and short news. That might gradually lead to people not wanting to dig into the core of the issues.
Yeah.
But you know, media pursue what people are used to. And I'm sorry. That is the way media raise their ratings. You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
What are your thoughts on that?
Let's say you wanted to change the school system in Korea. You couldn't do it unless the media was helping people to understand that there is a problem in education. So you need the media. The media opens up the problems. The difficulty is if the media keeps changing the subject. So one day it's the education, the next day it's beaches, the next day after that it's roads, the day after that it's a mountain path that's got a problem, the next day Kim Kardashian's in town, and the day after Jennifer Aniston's having a baby, whatever it is. And by the end of it, your mind is like, I can't remember what happened on the news yesterday.
Yes.
So there is no momentum. And if you want to be cynical, I don't necessarily want to be, you could almost say it's a conspiracy to keep us from really changing anything. Because we, the people, forget what we cared about. Last week we cared about hospitals. This week you think you care about the money supply. And tomorrow, I don't know, it'll be something else. But we can't keep the focus. And then we can't keep the focus of politicians.
You're not only a good writer, you're a good speaker.
Thank you.
In your book, it seems there are not enough in-depth explanation about TV ratings. I just talked about TV ratings before, and but media that stand in the market are obviously influenced by ratings, including JTBC.
What I would argue is that the job of a really top-quality broadcaster is not to report news so everyone falls asleep, but to make the important exciting and to make sure that whatever is exciting is also important. We can get excited by anything. And of course, it's easy to say, well, if we do all the serious stuff, our ratings will collapse. The trick is, and the job is, to make sure that you manage to make the most serious issues in your society as exciting as possible. This is very difficult. This is the job of an artist. I don't mean like a guy who paints, but I mean that it's not enough. Let's say global warming. So I have friends in media, and they say to me, if you put a story about global warming on, all the viewers fall asleep. So we need some dramatic thing about celebrity, because if we put Taylor Swift on TV, everyone likes to watch, but if we put global warming, no one watches. And then they say this is a fait accompli. But I think the challenge is, how can you make the melting of the polar ice caps as exciting as Taylor Swift's legs?
Okay. All right. Anyway, I hope you understand that we journalists cannot avoid the name of the game in the severe market competition. Yes, yes. You gave an example of Madame Bovary and Hamlet, and said that the news can highlight only one side of the many human aspects. Hamlet is a murderer, and Madame Bovary is guilty of extreme child cruelty. In literature, people would consider them tragic figures, as you said in the book. But news is not literature, is it?
What saddens me about sometimes the news is it wants the good guy and the bad guy. And this guy's very good, and this guy's very bad. And no nuance. I mean, take your recent story with the daughter of the Korean Airlines peanut scandal, macadamia nut scandal. Right? Now, I'm not sure how it is, but every article I've read in the Western press has made this woman out to be a ridiculous, crazy idiot, right? Universally. I read that story and I think this woman is a tragic character. She will never work again. She will never work again. She is in disgrace for the rest of her life. She's going to prison. It is a catastrophe for her life. Now, she was probably in many ways a horrible person, but she is still a human being. And as a writer, I miss that nuance.
Okay, yeah. Well, other questions. What do you think of the freedom of expression that Charlie Hebdo pursued? It's a big issue in the world.
Of course. Look, overall, I would say I'm a total believer in freedom of expression. Charlie Hebdo, of course, should be allowed. No one should shoot journalists, etc. So it goes without saying.
Yes.
And I don't like the way that some people say, well, you can be free, but you should be polite towards other religions. No, if you want to be rude, fine. But nevertheless, I do think that freedom of expression does not in itself make for a good media. A good media isn't merely free, it is also wise. So yes, it's free, and yes, freedom is always good and must always be defended, but it's only one ingredient of what we really want to get to, which is good news organizations. And freedom must be joined up with this other quality that I'm saying, wisdom.
Yeah. So, many people shout that they are Charlies, but some people say they are not Charlies. Can I ask you, whose side are you on? You're on the side of the letters?
So look, I'm totally on the side of a society which lets people publish cartoons and there is no one shooting someone who doesn't agree with them. It is barbaric to shoot someone who doesn't agree. The whole of the Enlightenment and modern thought is always about preventing things. Do I think that Charlie Hebdo was a fantastic magazine and they're doing great stuff? No, but that doesn't matter. That's not the issue. The issue is, should people be shot or not? And I absolutely think they mustn't be. it reminds me of how fragile an achievement it was to create societies where people in power, and maybe it's a gun, or maybe you're the king or the queen, where people in power would tolerate negative opinions. It's tremendously fragile. It's the achievement of only a few countries on this planet. I was in Turkey recently. Many journalists are being locked up again in Turkey. After a period of freedom, suddenly the president is deciding, actually it's inconvenient to have journalists, and is locking up journalists again. When that happens to a society, that society is in decline. So I passionately believe that journalists need to have their freedom.
Okay. This is my last question. Yeah. Can you tell us what your next book will focus on?
Well,
News again?
No, I want to look at love, which is a subject that I looked at early on in my career. And I looked at it very much from a young person's point of view. And I suppose I want to try and look at what happens to love with time. What happens to love over decades?
Yes.
And this is a very, in a way, unfashionable subject, because all our movies and all our songs are about the first 5 minutes of love. The exciting moment, you've just met somebody. And of course that's thrilling. But there is almost a silence, maybe because it's so painful, about the continuity of love. So that's what my book is about.
Yeah. I'll be definitely looking forward to reading it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Nice talking to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.